They call it black gold. Wars are fought over it. Economies are built on it. We tear the earth apart to get it. But have you ever thought about what oil actually is? It's death. It's the compressed remains of millions of years of life. Ancient forests, dinosaurs, oceans of plankton, all crushed, cooked, and liquefied by time. When you fill your car, you are burning ghosts. My name is Thomas Harris. I was the safety officer on Rig 42, an offshore drilling platform in the middle of the North Sea. We were stationed 100 miles from the nearest coast, floating on top of a dark, freezing abyss. Our job was simple: drill deeper than anyone else. The company geologists said there was a super reservoir down there, a pocket of oil so pure it would change the market forever. They were right about the pocket, but they were wrong about what was inside. It wasn't oil, it wasn't fuel, it was something older, something that had been sleeping in the crushing dark for eons. And we woke it up. Location, Rig 42, North Sea. Depth, 5,000 meters below sea level. Time, 02 Idame. Life on a rig is loud. It never stops. The platform shakes constantly, vibrating with the power of the massive diesel generators. You feel it in your teeth. You feel it in your bones. I was in the control room, drinking my 5th cup of coffee, watching the monitors. Outside, a storm was brewing. The waves were already 30 feet high, smashing against the steel legs of the platform like sledgehammers. "Status report," I said into the radio. "Drill is steady, Tom," replied Miller, the drill supervisor. His voice sounded crackly over the comms. "We are at 18,000 feet, just hitting the cap rock now. Pressure is rising, but within limits." "Keep an eye on the torque," I warned. "The sensors are showing some weird vibrations, like the rock is rubbery." "Rubbery?" Miller laughed. "It's granite, Tom. It's hard as hell." I watched the needle on the pressure gauge. It was twitching, not the smooth rise you expect when drilling through rock. It was jumping, spiking, thump, thump, thump. A vibration ran through the floor of the control room. It was different from the engines. It was rhythmic, like a heartbeat. "Did you feel that?" I asked. "Feel what?" Miller said. "Probably just the storm hitting the stabilizers." "No." I stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the drill floor. The rain was lashing against the glass. It came from below. Suddenly, the alarms on the console screamed. "Beep, beep, beep." "Pressure spike," Miller shouted. "We just punched through. The drill dropped 10 feet instantly. We're in the pocket." "Back off the pressure," I yelled. "Engage the blowout preventer. Bo-P, don't let it surge." "I'm trying. The mud pumps are maxed out." On the drill floor below, chaos erupted. The roughnecks were running. The massive Kelly drive was spinning wildly. Mud, drilling fluid, was spraying everywhere. But then, the mud changed color. Usually, drilling mud is a dull gray or brown. But what was spewing out of the pipe now was jet black. And it wasn't just liquid. It was thick, viscous. It moved like tar. "Stop the drill," I ordered, slamming the emergency stop button on my console. The machinery groaned and shuddered to a halt. The silence that followed was heavy. I grabbed my hard hat and ran down the metal stairs to the main deck. The smell hit me before I even opened the door. It didn't smell like oil. Oil smells like chemicals, like gasoline. This smelled like copper, like old pennies, and musk, like a wet animal. I walked onto the drill floor. The crew was standing around the rotary table, staring at the black sludge that was oozing out of the pipe. It was bubbling. "What is that?" one of the roughnecks, a kid named Dave, whispered. I stepped closer. The black substance was coating the deck. It was warm. I could feel the heat radiating from it, despite the freezing wind. I shined my flashlight on the pool of black liquid. It rippled, not from the wind, not from the vibration. The ripple started in the center and moved outward against the slope of the deck. "Miller," I said quietly, "get the sample kit. We need to analyze this." "It's just crude, Tom," Miller said, wiping his goggles. "Heavy crude." "No," I said, pointing my light at the pipe. "Look." We all looked. The black liquid wasn't just flowing out, it was pulsing. It was climbing up the sides of the drill pipe, defying gravity. It was coating the steel like a second skin. And as we watched, a large bubble formed on the surface of the pool. It burst with a wet pop. Inside the bubble, just for a second, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It looked like an eye, a milky, blind eye, rolling in the tar. "Seal the pipe," I said, my voice trembling. "Seal it now! Cap the well!" But it was too late. The rig shook violently. A deep, guttural roar echoed up from the pipe, from miles beneath the ocean floor. The earth wasn't giving us oil. It was bleeding, and the wound was angry. We evacuated the drill floor. I ordered a full lockdown of the red zone. Miller and I dragged Dave, the kid who was closest to the pipe, into the decontamination showers. "It burns!" Dave was screaming, clutching his left arm. "Get it off me! It's burning!" "Hold still, kid!" I shouted, blasting his arm with the high-pressure safety hose. The water was scalding hot, designed to strip chemical burns, but the black sludge didn't wash off. Oil is hydrophobic, it repels water, but eventually, with enough soap and pressure, it smears and comes off. This stuff didn't smear. It held its shape. It looked like a patch of black rubber glued to his skin. "Give me the brush," Miller said, his face pale. He grabbed a stiff bristle scrub brush and started scrubbing Dave's forearm. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Dave howled in pain. "Stop! You're tearing the skin!" Miller stopped. He dropped the brush. "Tom, look!" I leaned in closer. The skin around the black patch was red and raw from the scrubbing, but the black patch itself hadn't moved an inch. In fact, it looked smaller. "It's not on his skin," I whispered, realizing the horror of it. "It's in his skin." The black fluid wasn't sitting on the surface. It was sinking into his pores. It was absorbing into his bloodstream like ink into a sponge. "I can feel it," Dave whimpered, his eyes wide and wet. "It feels heavy. It feels like it's moving up my arm." "Get him to the infirmary," I ordered, trying to keep my voice steady. "Quarantine protocols. Nobody touches him without gloves. Nobody." As Miller led Dave away, I looked down at the floor of the shower. A single drop of the black fluid had fallen from Dave's arm. It sat on the white tile. It didn't spread. It pulsed. Once, twice. Then slowly, it started to slide towards the drain. Not with the flow of water, but against it. It was crawling towards the dark pipe, seeking the shadows. I stepped on it with my heavy, steel-toed boot. I ground it into the tile. When I lifted my boot, the black drop was gone. It hadn't been crushed. It had absorbed into the rubber sole of my boot. And for a second, I felt a faint, warm vibration tickle the bottom of my foot. I went straight to the comms tower on the upper deck. I needed to call the mainland. I needed to get a chopper out here now. The wind on the gantry was brutal. It was a force 10 gale. Rain hit my face like buckshot. I had to clip my safety harness to the railing just to keep from being blown into the ocean below. "Command!" I yelled into my radio. "This is Rig 42. Mayday! We have a biohazard containment breach. Requesting immediate medevac." Static. Just a wall of white noise. I reached the door to the radio room and slammed it shut behind me, cutting off the wind. "Sparky!" I yelled at the radio operator, a guy named Henderson. "Are we getting through?" Henderson was sitting at his console, headphones on, staring at the signal strength meter. He looked terrified. "I can't get a signal out, Tom," Henderson said, his voice shaking. "The satellite uplink is dead." "Is it the storm?" "No." Henderson turned to me. "The dish is aligned. The power is on. But listen to this." He flipped a switch, putting the audio on the room speakers. Instead of the usual hiss of atmospheric static, a sound filled the room. It was a low, rhythmic thrumming. Thump, thump, thump. It sounded exactly like the vibration I had felt in the control room, the heartbeat of the black fluid. "It's jamming us," Henderson whispered. "The signal is coming from below us, from the wellhead. It's broadcasting on every frequency." Suddenly, a massive crash shook the entire rig. The lights flickered and died, replaced by emergency red strobes. What was that? I grabbed the door handle. We ran back out onto the deck. I looked up towards the helipad. The main communications mast, a 50-foot steel tower, was gone. It hadn't just blown over. It looked like it had been pulled down. The thick steel girders were twisted and bent inwards, towards the center of the platform. "The radio tower?" Henderson gasped. "It's gone." I walked to the edge of the railing and looked down into the dark, churning water, 500 feet below. The wreckage of the tower was disappearing into the waves, but something else was down there. In the flash of a lightning bolt, I saw the ocean surface boiling. Thousands of black bubbles were rising from the depths, surrounding the legs of the rig. The platform groaned again, a sound of tortured metal. "We're not just offline, Tom," Henderson said, backing away from the rail. "We're trapped." I looked at the horizon. Nothing but black waves and rain. No ships, no lights. We were alone with it, and it had just cut the phone line. Time, 04:15 a.m. Location, crew quarters, infirmary. The storm outside was screaming, but inside the rig, the silence was worse. I was sitting in the infirmary next to Dave's cot. The kid looked terrible. The black veins had spread from his arm up to his neck. They looked like a road map of a city that shouldn't exist. His skin was burning hot to the touch, but he was shivering. "Tom," he whispered. His eyes were closed. "I'm here, Dave. Medevac is coming," I lied. The radio was still dead. "Just hang tight." "Can you hear them?" Dave asked. His voice sounded wet, thick. "Hear who? The wind?" "No." Dave opened his eyes. The whites of his eyes were gone. They were filled with that same shifting, milky darkness I saw in the oil. "The pipes, they are singing." I frowned and looked up at the ceiling. The rig was full of pipes. Water, steam, hydraulic fluid, crude oil. They always made noise, but this was different. I stood up and pressed my ear against the cold steel of the main water line running along the wall. At first, I heard nothing but the rush of liquid. Then, I heard it. It wasn't a mechanical sound, it was a murmur. Thousands of voices, overlapping, whispering in a language that sounded like grinding stones. It was vibrating through the metal structure of the entire platform. "We return, we return, we return." I pulled back as if the pipe had burned me. "It's not just inside me, Tom," Dave smiled. It was a horrible, stretched smile. "It's in the walls. It's in the steel. The rig, it's drinking it too." Suddenly, the intercom on the wall buzzed. It was Miller. "Tom, get to the dive control station. Now!" "What's wrong?" "It's the structural integrity sensors on leg 3. Miller's voice was tight with panic. "They are reading critical stress. Something is crushing the support leg." I looked back at Dave. He was humming now, harmonizing with the sound in the pipes. I grabbed my jacket and ran. Location, 50 meters below sea level. Character, Eric, lead diver. I stood in the dive control room, staring at the grainy black and white monitors. Eric, our lead diver, was already in the water. He was suspended in the cage, descending towards leg 3. "Comms check, Eric," I said into the microphone. "Loud and clear, Tom," Eric replied. His voice was calm, professional. "Visibility is garbage, maybe 5 feet. Current is strong." "Watch your tether," I warned. "Sensors say the damage is at minus 50 meters, just below the waterline." On the screen, I saw Eric swim out of the cage. His flashlight cut a narrow beam through the murky, particulate-filled water. "Approaching leg 3 now," Eric said. "I see. Wait. What do you see?" "The leg. It's covered in something. It looks like seaweed, but it's thick." Eric moved closer. Through his helmet camera, we saw the massive steel pillar of the rig. It wasn't gray anymore. It was coated in a thick, pulsating black sludge, the same stuff from the drill. "It's the oil," I said. "It leaked into the sea." "No, Tom," Eric said, his breathing getting faster. "Oil floats. This stuff it's wrapping around the leg. It's squeezing it." Eric reached out with a gloved hand to touch the structure. "Eric, don't touch it!" I yelled. Too late. He poked the black mass with his metal probe. The mass flinched. The entire coating on the leg rippled. Thousands of tiny black tendrils shot out from the mass, grasping at the water, trying to find what had touched it. Jesus Christ! Eric swam back, thrashing his fins. It's alive! The whole damn leg is alive! Get out of there, Eric! Get back to the cage! Wait! Eric stopped. He turned his helmet light downwards, into the deep, dark abyss below the platform. Tom, the sensors were right. The leg is bending. What? Something is pulling on it from below. Something huge. On the monitor, I saw Eric looking down into the black void. And then, something moved in the deep background. It was immense. A shadow so big it blocked out the faint light from the surface. A massive, serpentine shape, easily 100 feet wide, slowly coiling around the base of the rig far below. It wasn't a whale. It wasn't a submarine. It was a limb. A single, giant limb of something much, much bigger. Oh my God, Eric whispered. We aren't drilling into the earth, Tom. Eric, move! We're drilling into a shell. We're standing on top of an egg. Suddenly, the screen went static. Crunch. A sound like a submarine imploding echoed through the speakers. Then, silence. Eric! I screamed. Eric, report! Nothing but the hiss of the empty ocean. Winches up! Miller shouted at the operators. Pull the cage up! The cables screamed as they retracted. We waited, breathless, as the cage broke the surface and was hauled onto the deck. It was empty. The steel bars of the cage were bent open like soft clay, and dripping from the bars was that same thick black blood. The ocean wasn't just below us anymore. It was coming up to claim us. Abandon rig! Miller screamed over the wind. Get to the lifeboats! Move! Move! The loss of Eric broke everyone. The discipline was gone. Roughnecks pushed past engineers, scrambling towards the muster stations on the lower deck. I ran alongside Miller, checking the corridors. Where is Dave? I yelled. I told the medic to keep him secured. The medic is dead, Tom! Miller shouted back, his eyes wild. I found him in the hallway. His neck was twisted. My stomach turned. Dave wasn't just sick anymore. He was hostile. We burst onto the lifeboat deck. There were 2 capsules, orange unsinkable pods designed to survive anything. 20 men were crowding around pod 1. Get the door open! Someone screamed. It's stuck! I pushed through the crowd. Let me see. Back off! I grabbed the heavy release lever of the lifeboat hatch. It wouldn't budge. It wasn't frozen. It felt welded. I shone my flashlight into the mechanism. It wasn't rust. The gears were clogged with the black sludge. But it had changed. It had hardened into a resin-like substance, hard as rock. It had fused the door shut. Try pod 2, I shouted. We ran to the other side. Same thing. The launch mechanisms were gummed up with the black resin. This isn't an accident, I muttered, touching the hardened slime. Someone did this. Someone deliberately disabled the boats. Tom! Miller grabbed my shoulder and pointed up. High above us, on the gantry overlooking the lifeboat deck, a figure was standing in the rain. It was Dave, but he wasn't shivering anymore. He was standing perfectly still, ignoring the hurricane-force wind. His skin was completely black now, slick and shiny like a seal's, and he was smiling. You can't leave! Dave shouted. His voice was wrong. It was too deep. It sounded like 2 people speaking at once. We aren't finished yet! He raised his hand. He was holding a flare gun. Dave, don't! I screamed. He didn't aim at us. He aimed at the fuel drums stacked near the crane engine. Pop! Hiss! The flare hit the drums. An explosion of fire erupted, cutting off our path to the helipad. The shockwave knocked us flat. Back inside! I roared, dragging Miller up. Everyone to the galley! Seal the doors! Location, the mess hall, central deck. Survivors, 12 men left. We slammed the heavy watertight doors of the galley and spun the wheel to lock it. We were trapped in the belly of the beast. Is that it? Miller gasped, sliding down the wall. Is everyone else? Gone, I said, doing a quick head count. 12 of us, out of 40. The explosion cut off the others. The galley was silent, except for the terrified breathing of the men. I looked at them. Grease-stained faces, bleeding knuckles, eyes full of terror. Listen to me, I shouted, trying to take command. We are safe in here for now. These doors are rated for blast pressure. The fire can't get in. What about that thing? Asked Jenkins, a young roustabout. Dave. What was he? That wasn't Dave, I said grimly. Whatever came out of that well, it takes you over. It uses you. I looked around the room. Check yourselves, right now. If anyone has even a drop of that black SHT on them, speak up, or I throw you out myself. Silence. Men started frantically checking their arms, their boots. I'm clean, Miller said. Me too. We're clean, Tom? Suddenly, the intercom on the wall crackled to life. It shouldn't have been working. The power was cut. Tom? It was Dave's voice, but it was coming from everywhere. Open the door, Tom. It's cold out here. Don't listen to him, I yelled. Nobody touch that door. You think the steel protects you? The voice laughed. It was a wet, gurgling sound. You are looking at the walls. You should be looking at the vents. We all froze. We looked up. The galley had large industrial ventilation ducts running across the ceiling. Drip. A single drop of black liquid fell from the vent directly onto the stainless steel table in the center of the room. Drip. Drip. Then the metal of the vent groaned. Something was inside the ducts, something heavy, and it was crawling right above our heads. They're inside, Miller screamed. Get the welding torches. Weld the vents. We don't have torches, I shouted, looking for a weapon. I grabbed a heavy meat cleaver from the kitchen counter. Get back. Everyone back against the wall. The vent cover burst open. Location, the engine room. Lower deck. Survivors, 5 men left. The vent cover in the galley crashed onto the table. A mass of black sludge poured out, forming into the shape of a torso. It screeched, a sound like metal tearing. Run! I screamed. To the service stairs. Go down! We scrambled through the kitchen back door, leaving the others behind. I heard their screams. I heard the wet crunch of bones snapping. I didn't look back. We sprinted down the narrow metal staircase, deeper into the rig. With every flight of stairs, the air got hotter. The smell became unbearable, burning diesel mixed with that rotting musk. Where are we going? Miller gasped, limping. He had lost his hard hat. The engine room, I shouted. We have to overload the main generators. If we blow the fuel tanks, we kill this thing. Suicide? It's better than becoming that, I spat. We reached the heavy blast door of the engine room. It was warm to the touch. I spun the wheel and kicked it open. We froze. The engine room was massive, a cathedral of pipes and turbines. But it didn't look like a machine shop anymore. It looked like the inside of a ribcage. The black resin had coated everything. The walls, the floor, the ceiling. Thick, vein-like cables of the black substance were pulsing along the pipes, pumping fluid into the massive diesel generators. My God, Miller whispered. It's driving the rig. The creature wasn't just destroying the platform, it was integrating with it. The pistons were moving, but not with fuel. They were being pushed by the black muscle. The lights were flickering with a biological rhythm. In the center of the room, hanging from the ceiling like a bat, was a cocoon. It was made of the black slime, and inside it, trapped in the resin, was the chief engineer. His face was frozen in a silent scream, tubes of the black stuff going into his mouth and nose. He was the battery. Don't look at him, I grabbed Miller. Get to the control panel. Override the safeties. We need to make these engines run until they melt. We ran across the fleshy floor. It squelched under our boots. The room was alive, and it knew we were there. I reached the main console. I smashed the glass cover of the emergency shutoff, but instead of hitting stop, I jammed the throttle levers to max. Bypassing the governors, I yelled. RPM is redlining. She's gonna blow in 5 minutes. The engines screamed. The vibration was so intense it blurred my vision. Suddenly, the entire rig lurched sideways. Crack! It sounded like the world snapping in half. Gravity shifted. We slid across the floor, slamming into the railing. We're listing, Miller shouted. Leg 3 just collapsed. No. I pulled myself up. It didn't collapse. It was pulled. I looked out the reinforced porthole near the waterline. The storm was illuminated by the emergency strobes, and then I saw the scale of it. The drill pipe, the one going down 5 miles. It wasn't a pipe anymore. It had shattered. Rising from the moon pool, wrapping around the entire platform, was a tentacle. But it was colossal. It was as thick as a highway. It was covered in barnacles and ancient scars. It was squeezing the oil rig like a soda can. We didn't hit a pocket miller, I realized, staring at the Leviathan. We stuck a needle into a living god, and now it's swatting the mosquito. The black sludge in the room began to rise. It was forming shapes again. Faceless, humanoid shapes peeling themselves off the walls. The antibodies of the beast. "They're coming!" Miller yelled, grabbing a large wrench. "The engines!" I checked the gauge. 2 minutes to critical mass. We have to hold them off. "Tom," Miller looked at me. He was calm now. "Go to the flare tower. You need to manually trigger the ignition if the panel fails." "I'm not leaving you!" "Someone has to make sure this place burns." Miller smiled sadly. He looked at the horde of black monsters advancing on us. "Go! Tell the world not to dig." He charged at them, swinging the wrench. "Go!" I turned and ran. I ran towards the ladder leading to the upper deck. Behind me I heard Miller screaming, and then the wet sound of tearing flesh. I climbed. I climbed while the rig groaned and tilted into the hungry sea. Location: the flare tower, highest point of the rig. Status: critical. The rig was dying. It was tilted at a 45-degree angle. I wasn't running anymore. I was climbing the deck, grating like a ladder. Below me, the ocean churned with white foam and black ink. The massive tentacle was crushing the accommodation block like it was made of paper. I reached the base of the flare tower. This was the highest point, the gas vent. "Come on!" I screamed, pulling myself up the final ladder. My hands were bleeding. My lungs were burning. I reached the ignition platform. The wind here was strong enough to peel the skin off your face. I looked at the control panel for the pilot light. It was smashed. The automatic ignition was dead. "Damn it!" I patted my pockets. No lighter, no matches. I looked down. The engine room was glowing red. The overload was seconds away. But without the gas flare lit, the blowout preventer wouldn't ignite the massive gas cloud releasing from the well. It would just be a spill. I needed fire. I needed a total burn. Then I saw him. Standing on the railing of the tilted walkway, defying gravity, was Dave. Or the thing wearing Dave's skin. He wasn't smiling anymore. His face had split open, revealing rows of translucent, needle-like teeth. "It's beautiful, isn't it, Tom?" the thing gurgled. "The ocean is taking back what is hers." "Go to hell," I shouted. "We are already there." Dave stepped closer. "Put down the flare gun, Tom. Join the deep. It's warm. It's eternal." I looked at my hand. I was still clutching the emergency flare gun I had grabbed from the lifeboat deck earlier. I had forgotten I had it. I raised the gun. "You're right, Dave," I said, aiming not at him, but at the massive cloud of methane gas venting above our heads. "It is cold out here." Dave's eyes widened. He screeched, a sound of pure alien panic. He lunged at me. "Let's warm it up." I pulled the trigger. Boom! The red magnesium flare shot up into the gas cloud. For a microsecond, there was silence. Then the sky turned orange. The gas ignited. A massive fireball, hotter than the sun, engulfed the tower. The shockwave hit me like a freight train. It blew Dave off the railing into the abyss. And then, the engines below detonated. Boom! The rig broke in half. I was thrown into the air, falling into a world of fire and water. They found me 2 days later, floating on a piece of wreckage, 50 miles south of the site. I was the only survivor. The official report said it was a catastrophic blowout caused by a rogue wave. They blamed the structural failure on the storm. They paid off the families. They sealed the records. Shell, BP, Exxon, they all stayed away from that sector for a while. But memory is short, and greed is eternal. Last week, I saw the news. A new consortium is building a next-generation platform, Rig 55, right over the same coordinates. They say the reservoir is too valuable to ignore. I live in a small cabin now, far inland. I don't go near the sea. But sometimes when it rains, I swear the water tastes like copper. And yesterday, I was walking by the local creek. I saw a patch of oil on the water. Just a rainbow sheen from a car leak, probably, but I watched it. I watched it for an hour. It didn't drift with the current. It stayed in place. And then, it blinked. The ocean is big, my friends, and deep. We think we are the masters of this planet because we can build islands of steel, but we are just guests. And the landlord is waking up. This is Captain Nightwhisper. If you see black oil on the beach, don't touch it. Run. Out.